long the battle dodgers abandoned the wood, the ones who had let down their lord earlier, the tail-turners, 10 of them together. When he needed them most, they had made off. Now they were ashamed and came behind shields in their battle outfits to where the old man lay. They watched Wiglaf, sitting worn out, a comrade shoulder to shoulder with his lord, trying in vain to bring him round with water. Much as he wanted to, there was no way he could preserve his lord's life on earth, or alter in the least the Almighty's will. What God judged right would rule what happened, to every man, as it does to this day. Then a stern rebuke was bound to come from the young warrior to the ones who had been cowards. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke disdainfully and in disappointment. Anyone ready to admit the truth will surely realize that the Lord of Men, who showered you with gifts and gave you the armor you are standing in, when he would distribute helmets and mail shirts to men on the mead benches, a prince treating his thanes in hall to the best he could find, far or near, was throwing weapons uselessly away. It would be a sad waste when the war broke out. Beowulf had little cause to brag about his armed guard, yet God who ordains who wins or loses allowed him to strike with his own blade when bravery was needed. There was little I could do to protect his life in the heat of the fray, yet I found new strength welling up when I went to help him. Then my sword connected, and the deadly assaults of our foe grew weaker, the fire coursed less strongly from his head. But when the worst happened, too few rallied around the prince. So it is goodbye now to all you know and love on your home ground. The open-handedness, the giving of war swords, every one of you with freeholds of land, our whole nation will be dispossessed, once princes from beyond get tidings of how you turned and fled and disgraced yourselves. A warrior will sooner die than live a life of shame. Then he ordered the outcome of the fight to be reported to those who camped on the ridge, that crowd of retainers who had sat all morning sad at heart, shield-bearers wondering about the man they loved. Would this day be his last, or would he return? He told the truth, and did not balk, the rider who bore news to the cliff top. He addressed them all. Now the people's pride and love, the lord of the Geats, is laid on his deathbed, brought down by the dragon's attack. Beside him lies the bane of his life, dead from knife wounds. There was no way Beowulf could manage to get the better of the monster with his sword. Wiglaf sits at Beowulf's side, the son of Weohstan, the living warrior watching by the dead, keeping weary vigil, holding awake for the loved and the loathed. Now war is looming over our nation. Soon it will be known to Franks and Frisians far and wide that the king is gone. Hostility has been great among the Franks since Healac sailed forth at the head of a war fleet into Friesland. There the Hetwa harried and attacked and overwhelmed him with great odds. The leader in his war gear was laid low, fell amongst followers. That lord did not favour his company with spoils. The Merovingian king has been an enemy to us ever since. Nor do I expect peace or pact-keeping of any sort from the Swedes. Remember at Ravenswood, Ongentheow slaughtered Hetsin, Hrethel's son, when the Geat people in their arrogance first attacked the fierce Scilfings. The return blow was quickly struck by Other's father. Old and terrible, he felled the Sea King and saved his own aged wife, the mother of Onela and of Other, bereft of her gold rings. Then he kept hard on the heels of the foe and drove them leaderless, lucky to get away, in a desperate rout into Ravenswood. His army surrounded the weary remnant where they nursed their wounds all through the night. He howled threats at those huddled survivors, promised to axe their bodies open when dawn broke, dangle them from gallows to feed the birds. But at first light, when their spirits were lowest, relief arrived. They heard the sound of Healac's horn, his trumpet calling as he came to find them, the hero in pursuit, at hand with troops. The bloody swath that Swedes and Geats cut through each other was everywhere. No one could miss their murderous feuding. Then the old man made his move, pulled back, barred his people in. Ongentheow withdrew to higher ground. Healac's pride and prowess as a fighter were known to the earl. He had no confidence that he could hold out against that horde of seamen, defend wife and the ones he loved from the shock of their attack. He retreated for shelter behind the earth wall. Then Healac swooped on the Swedes at bay. His banners swarmed into their refuge. His Geat forces drove forward to destroy the camp. There in his grey hairs Ongentheow was cornered, ringed around with swords, and it came to pass that the king's fate was in Eofa's hands, and in his alone. Wulf, son of Wonred, went for him in anger, split him open so that blood came spurting from under his hair. The old hero still did not flinch, but parried fast, hit back with a harder stroke. The king turned and took him on. Then Wonred's son, the brave wolf, could land no blow against the aged lord. Ongentheow divided his helmet so that he buckled and bowed his bloodied head and dropped to the ground. But his doom held off, though he was cut deep, he recovered again. With his brother down, the undaunted Eofor Healak's thane hefted his sword and smashed murderously at the massive helmet, past the lifted shield, and the king collapsed. The shepherd of people was sheared of life. Many then hurried to help Wolf, bandaged and lifted him, now that they were left masters of the blood-soaked battleground. One warrior stripped the other, looted Ongentheow's iron mailcoat, his hard sword hilt, his helmet too, and carried the graith to King Healak. He accepted the prize, promised fairly that reward would come, and kept his word for their bravery in action. Eofor and Wolf were overloaded by Hrethil's son, Healak the Geat, with gifts of land and linked rings that were worth a fortune. They had won glory, so there was no gainsaying his generosity, and he gave Eofor his only daughter to bide at home with him, an honor and a bond. So this bad blood between us and the Swedes, this vicious feud, I am convinced is bound to revive. They will cross our borders and attack in force when they find out that Beowulf is dead. In days gone by, when our warriors fell and we were undefended, he kept our coffers and our kingdom safe. He worked for the people. But as well as that, he behaved like a hero. We must hurry now to take a last look at the king, and launch him lord and lavisher of rings on the funeral road. His royal pyre will melt no small amount of gold, heaped there in a hoard. It was bought at heavy cost, and that pile of rings he paid for at the end, with his own life, will go up with the flame, be furled in fire. Treasure no follower will wear in his memory, nor lovely woman link and attach as a torque around her neck. But often, repeatedly, in the path of exile, they shall walk bereft, bowed under woe, now that their leader's laugh is silenced, high spirits quenched. Many a spear, dawn cold to the touch, will be taken down and waved on high. The swept harp won't waken warriors, but the raven, winging darkly over the doomed, will have news. Tidings for the eagle of how he hoped and ate, how the wolf and he made short work of the dead. Such was the drift of the dire report that gallant man delivered. He got little wrong in what he told and predicted. The whole troop rose in tears, then took their way to the uncanny scene under Ioninus. There on the sand, where his soul had left him, they found him at rest, their ring-giver from days gone by. The great man had breathed his last. Beowulf the king had indeed met with a marvelous death. But what they saw first was far stranger. The serpent on the ground, gruesome and vile, lying facing him. The fire dragon was scarcely burnt, scorched all colors. From head to tail, his entire length was 50 feet. He had shimmered forth on the night air once, then winged back, down to his den, but death owned him now. He would never enter his earth gallery again. Beside him stood pitchers and piled-up dishes, silent flagons, precious swords, eaten through with rust, ranged as they had been while they waited their 1,000 winters underground. That huge cache, gold inherited from an ancient race, was under a spell, which meant no one was ever permitted to enter the ring hall unless God himself, mankind's keeper, true king of triumphs, allowed some person pleasing to him, and in his eyes worthy, to open the hoard. What came about brought to nothing the hopes of the one who had wrongly hidden riches under the rock face. First the dragon slew that man among men, who in turn made fierce amends and settled the feud. Famous for his deeds, a warrior may be, but it remains a mystery where his life will end, when he may no longer dwell in the mead hall among his own. So it was with Beowulf. When he faced the cruelty and cunning of the mound guard, he himself was ignorant of how his departure from the world would happen. The high-born chiefs who had buried the treasure declared it until doomsday so accursed that whoever robbed it would be guilty of wrong, and grimly punished for their transgression, hasped in hell bonds in heathen shrines. Yet Beowulf's gaze at the gold treasure when he first saw it had not been selfish. Wiglaf, son of Weohstan, spoke. Often when one man follows his own will, many are hurt. This happened to us. Nothing we advised could ever convince the prince we loved, our land's guardian, not to vex the custodian of the gold. Let him lie where he was long accustomed, lurk there under earth until the end of the world. He held to his high destiny. The hoard is laid bare, but at a grave cost. It was too cruel a fate that forced the king to that encounter. I have been inside and seen everything amassed in the vault. I managed to enter, although no great welcome awaited me under the earth wall. I quickly gathered up a huge pile of the priceless treasures, hand-picked from the hoard, and carried them here, where the king could see them. He was still himself, alive, aware, and in spite of his weakness, he had many requests. He wanted me to greet you, and order the building of a barrow that would crown the site of his pyre, serve as his memorial, in a commanding position, since of all men to have lived and thrived and lauded it on earth, his worth and due as a warrior were the greatest. Now let us again go quickly and feast our eyes on that amazing fortune heaped under the wall. I will show the way and take you close to those coffers packed with rings and bars of gold. Let a bier be made, and got ready quickly when we come out. And then let us bring the body of our Lord, the man we loved, to where he will lodge for a long time in the care of the Almighty. Then Weohstan's son, stalwart to the end, had given orders to owners of dwellings, many people of importance in the land, to fetch wood from far and wide for the good man's pyre. Now shall flame consume our leader in battle, the blaze darken round him who stood his ground in the steel hail, when the arrow storm shot from bowstrings, pelted the shield wall, the shaft hit home. Feather-fledged it finned the barb in flight. Next, the wise son of Weohstan called from among the king's thanes a group of 7. He selected the best and entered with them, the 8th of their number, under the god-cursed roof. One raised a lighted torch and led the way. No lots were cast for who should loot the hoard, for it was obvious to them that every bit of it lay unprotected within the vault, there for the taking. It was no trouble to hurry to work and haul out the priceless store. They pitched the dragon over the cliff top, let tides flow and backwash take the treasure minder. Then coiled gold was loaded on a cart in great abundance, and the grey-haired leader, the prince on his bier, borne to Hronesness. The Geat people built a pyre for Beowulf, stacked and decked it until it stood 4 square, hung with helmets, heavy war shields, and shining armor, just as he had ordered it. Then his warriors laid him in the middle of it, mourning, a lord far famed and beloved. On a height they kindled the hugest of all funeral fires. Fumes of wood smoke billowed darkly up. The blaze roared and drowned out their weeping. Wind died down, and flames wrought havoc in the hot bone house, burning it to the core. They were disconsolate and wailed aloud for their lord's decease. A Geat woman, too, sang out in grief. With hair bound up, she unburdened herself of her worst fears. A wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement. Heaven swallowed the smoke. Then the Geat people began to construct a mound on a headland, high and imposing, a marker that sailors could see from far away. And in 10 days they had done the work. It was their hero's memorial. What remained from the fire they housed inside it behind a wall, as worthy of him as their workmanship could make it. And they buried torques in the barrow and jewels, and a trove of such things as trespassing men had once dared to drag from the hoard. They let the ground keep that ancestral treasure, gold under gravel, gone to earth, as useless to men now as it ever was. Then 12 warriors rode around the tomb, chieftains' sons, champions in battle, all of them distraught, chanting in dirges, mourning his loss as a man and a king. They extolled his heroic nature and exploits, and gave thanks for his greatness, which was the proper thing. For a man should praise a prince whom he holds dear, and cherish his memory when that moment comes, when he has to be convoyed from his bodily home. So the Geat people, his hearth companions, sorrowed for the lord who had been laid low. They said that of all the kings upon the earth, he was the man most gracious and fair-minded, kindest to his people, and keenest to win fame.
This concludes the Mutant Museum's exhibit on Beowulf. I hope you've enjoyed the series. I want to say a huge thank you to all of my incredible Patreon supporters who made this exhibit possible, particularly Andre D., Break System BSE, Michael Fattori, Zachary Snowden-Smith, and Xana Zira. So thank you so much for joining us in this rousing tale of adventure and Anglo-Saxon heroism, and thanks for being you.